Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Oh, we're still connecting. There we go. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for one final round of Rendezvous with Romance. Every month, my name is Amy. I'm a Schuler Books bookseller. I get to talk to the authors of newly released romances from Avon. It's been a blast. This is the final installment, and I have 4 guests again tonight, so this will be a fun one. You can find all of tonight's featured titles along with many, many others on our shelves at Schuler Books or on our website at schulerbooks.com. And we do ship internationally. So if you are anywhere in the world and you are checking this out, we would love to send you some romance novels or any books, but obviously we're a little bit partial tonight. All right, it is my great pleasure to introduce some authors to you tonight. First of all is my one and only returning author, Addison Fox, who was with me for my very first Rendezvous with Romance event. Thank you for joining me again. Addison is a lifelong romance reader, always in search of her next happy ever after. She discovered she found as much joy writing about romance as she did reading it, and she never looked back. Addison lives in New York with an apartment full of books, a laptop rarely out of reach, and a wily beagle who keeps her running. And Forget Me Not Cowboy is the book she told us about last time. It is her long-awaited amnesia romance. Takes us back to Rustlers Creek, where a handsome ranch vet's long ago love has finally returned, but soon he won't remember all of their years apart or why he's never been able to forget her. Thank you for joining me again, Addison. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, we are also joined by Christy Carlyle, fueled by Pacific Northwest coffee and inspired by multiple viewings of every British costume drama she can get her hands on. Same, although mine is tea, not coffee. Christy Carlyle writes essential historical romance set in the Victorian era. She loves heroes who struggle against all odds and heroines who are ahead of their time. A former teacher with a degree in history, she finds there's nothing better than being able to combine her love of the past with a diehard belief in happy endings. And in Lady Meets Earl, she sweeps readers away on an all-new romantic holiday to the wilds of Scotland, where a young woman discovers her vacation home is unexpectedly owned by a strange and devastatingly handsome earl. Welcome, Christy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, and next we have Eloisa James. Eloisa James is a best-selling author and professor of English literature who lives with her family in New York, but can sometimes be found in Paris or Italy. She is the mother of 2, and in a particularly delicious irony for a romance writer, is married to a genuine Italian knight. In her newest release, The Reluctant Countess, we return to the would-be Wallflowers series with an enemies to lovers romance between a proper earl and an entirely improper lady whom he cannot stop thinking about. Welcome, Eloisa. Thank you for being with us. And finally, but last but not least, Lori Wilde, a best-selling author of almost 100 works of romantic fiction, several which have inspired Hallmark movies. She's a registered nurse, holds a certificate in forensics, and is also a certified yoga instructor. She lives with her husband Bill in Texas, and they run a writing and creativity retreat center. In the Cowboy Cookie Challenge, which actually came out in October, but we're glad that she can join us this month for our conversation, we return to Twilight, Texas with a delicious love story about a sexy cowboy and a love-shy nurse determined to win the Christmas Cookie Bake-Off Challenge. Welcome, Lori. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
All right, so I've given the back of the book blurb, but I would love to hear you tell us a little bit more about your new release that came out on Tuesday, maybe where it falls in its series, and sort of what your inspiration for it was. So Addison, will you start us off with your amnesia story?
Sure. I know amnesia is the part I have focused on because, as I think I put at the end of the book, I have always wanted to write an amnesia story. They're one of my favorite tropes to read. And I just never had the right couple. I never had the right story. And this couple, Harper and Gray, ended up being the right couple. It is a reunion romance. So the heroine, Harper, is the sister of the heroine in the first book in the series. The series is Rustlers Creek. It's set in my made-up town in Montana. And the heroine in the first book is a Food Network type star. So this is her quieter sister who had a romance very young with a young man in town who ultimately became a large animal vet. And he sent her away for all the reasons that people do, and they went their separate ways. And this is their reunion story. So I love a reunion romance as well. I love playing with this idea of who people remember one another being when they were so much younger, but then who they've become and rediscovering each other. And then I just had so much fun with the amnesia part of the story. So.
Mm-hmm. And it's such a twist on the amnesia story because he doesn't forget her, he forgets that they broke up.
They broke up.
So
Yes. So.
all sorts of fun. Like I said, you got me with that one.
I will certainly admit to taking some liberties. I did my research on amnesia. I'm extremely happy to know that
it's a twist on the amnesia story because
I did my research on amnesia. I'm extremely happy to know that it's
background noise here.
I did my research.
Don't know where that's coming from. Oh, okay. I don't know. It wasn't on my end, but here we are. Okay. We just really wanted to talk about that amnesia story.
Exactly.
Or didn't want to forget the part of the amnesia story. All right, Christy, will you tell us more about the Earl and the girl?
Sure. Lady Meets Earl is the second in my Love on Holiday series. The concept for this series was that people go away on holiday or vacation and fall in love. Each book is a standalone. This is the first series where I haven't had any significant connection between the characters from one book to the next, which is kind of fun and freeing. But this book in particular, set in Scotland and based partly on one of my favorite rom-coms, which is The Holiday. And it's sort of that thing about going away to a house that you think you're renting or are supposed to be at, and someone's there that is not supposed to be there, at least in your opinion, and they're gorgeous and you're really attracted to them and you're kind of stuck together in a Scottish manner. Oh boy, what's going to happen? So yeah.
Sounds terrible.
For this. Yeah, it sounds awful. It's a real burden.
All right, and Eloisa, tell us why the countess is reluctant.
Well, so it's the second book in a series, but it doesn't really matter because it's their wallflowers. They would be wallflowers, so they wish they were wallflowers. My heroine had a really bad experience when she was young, and it basically has been slut shamed. And so any woman that's happened to has a decision to make, right? Do you feel shamed? Or do you just say, you know, the heck with it. I'm going to wear really sensual clothes and I'm going to giggle and I'm going to flirt because that's who I am. And that's my heroine. She goes to London and she kind of collects all the men all around her, but she's really actually quite chaste. But her mother is having an affair with Napoleon, among other things. So her reputation is not good. And by the way, I know everything about Napoleon's love life now. So I fit the mother in between two other ladies, never mind the wives. Yeah. So anyway, one of the people in her surroundings is a very, very grumpy, very uptight earl who would, never marry her, ever, 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 because she's everything he doesn't want in a countess. But, you know, I think that the grumpy sunshine trope is an incredibly fun one. I mean, I also really love amnesia. I haven't gone there, but I think, you know, it really works best when there's a reason why someone is sunshiny. She's not going to allow all these people to make her feel bad. And there's a good reason why the Earl is grumpy. He would really like to be with her, but he can't because of, you know, reasons. So it's also fun because it's the first book in a long time where I have a true villain. So that was fun to do. Mm-hmm. She's bad, like she's Cruella de Vil bad. So.
All right, thank you. And Lori, tell us more about the Cowboy Christmas Cookie Challenge.
It's the 13th book in my Twilight, Texas series. And this one was so fun because the character that was a little girl in my first New York Times bestseller, The First Love Cookie Club, she was 8 years old. She was a sick little girl. It was kind of a Tiny Tim theme. And she's all better now, and she's all grown up. And like Louisa said, it's a sunshine grumpy trope because she went through. She's very bubbly, so she gets her romance. So that was fun.
Mm-hmm. And she grew up to become a nurse so that she could help other kids that
Yeah,
had.
to help other kids that were sick. Yeah.
Mhm. Wonderful. Well, what got each of you started reading and writing romance? You know, you've all been in it for a while. What got you started in the genre?
Want us to go in order?
You can go in whatever order you want. I don't want to put too many rules here, but if you want to go ahead and kick us off, Addison, go for it.
Sure. So I have said this always, I'm a reader first. I've been a reader my whole life, and I found romance relatively young. I did, the teen romances, and I did the Sunfire romances when those were big, and probably discovered adult romance way younger than my mother would ever want to know. But I've just always been a reader, and I love romance, and I love how elastic the genre is and how many wonderful stories there are, and every storyteller can take the same trope but tell it differently and put their own spin on it and use their own creativity. And when I realized that I wanted to be a writer, romance was the thing that I wanted to do. So it's been really a wonderful journey. I've been doing it actually longer than I realized. It was 14 years last week, 2 weeks ago, that I actually sold my first book. So in my head, for some reason, I keep thinking I'm a newbie, and it's like, no, you can't say that anymore. You've been doing this too long. But in a very fun little twist, I'll do a call out because she was so amazing. Lori and I were in the same chapter in Texas, and she was one of the first published authors who really gave me a critique that was extremely usable. She took the time with me. I had hit that wall where I wasn't kind of hitting the next step, and I wasn't kind of getting where I wanted to be. And she incredibly graciously spent time with me, and it made a huge difference. It made a huge difference in my own growth, my own journey, working towards being published. So,
What? I could tell you had promise.
Well,
And look
Laura,
at you now.
Laura, what got you started in the romance genre?
I always was an avid reader from the time I was a little kid, and I realized that people wrote books. I knew that's what I was meant to do. I mean, other people like, I don't know what to do. It's like, I know what I want to do. But I was a big mystery fan. I was like, Agatha Christie was my big thing. My father was a editor for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And back in the day, they had book reviewers, and he would get all these books. Well, he didn't want to read the romances. So Gothics were popular at the time, and he gave my dad all the Gothics, and my dad would bring them home to me, and I just like consumed them. And so that's kind of where I first got into the romance genre.
I can hook mine onto that just because my dad was the opposite of your dad. I was reading lots of romance, but my father was a poet. He won the American Book Award for poetry. And he was like, you can't read this stuff, your brain's going to fry. And so he made a deal with me. He's like, all right, you can read romance, but you have to read classics. So I made my way through like all of Jane Austen, obviously, but then I just started on Dickens and everybody else. Because I was obsessed by Harlequin Presents. I love them. I still love them. In the last 2 weeks, I've taken a deep dive into Harlequin Presents. So believe me, the amnesia posts are right in the top of my mind right now. So my dad also had a signal part of my life, because now I am a Shakespeare professor, right? So I got through those classics, but I'm also a romance writer. So I got through the romances too.
Mm-hmm. A little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And what about you,
Like
Christy?
everybody else, I was a reader, a bookworm from the time I was a kid. I also had aspirations to be a writer. I won a little poetry contest, I think in 4th grade. And I think that was the first moment I had like these delusions of grandeur about, well, if I won this poetry contest about a ladybug, then surely I can be a writer. But I mostly love Nancy Drew. I graduated like Victoria Holt. And somewhere in there, I discovered romance and really fell in love with it. And I think my favorite part of it as a reader and writer is the happy ending. There's a lot of great literature that ends in a very bittersweet or tragic way, but I love that I get to tell stories where there is a happy ever after.
Yep. As a reader, I feel the same way. My mother likes to remind me that as a toddler, I would wander around at family gatherings with a book and just go up to any adult and say, "Read a book, read a book, read a book, read a book." So when I left teaching and decided suddenly, sort of out of the blue, to become a bookseller, it was no surprise to anybody. I didn't ever take it in the writing direction, but I will read just about anything, but my preference will always be something that I know it's going to work out okay. Especially in the last couple of years, I have found it really difficult to read a book that I don't know is going to end okay. So more and more romance for me, which is not a problem in my world. Let's see. So how has the romance genre changed since you started in the genre, however long ago that was for you? What changes have you noticed in the world of romance?
I think I'm the oldest. Lori, you can go next. I'm well over 20 years here in the published world. So I'd say so much has changed. I mean, things like Amnesia Plot have survived, but pirates, it's a lot more difficult to sell a pirate right now because of issues of consent. Those pirates do not come along and say, do you mind if I put my hand on your shoulder? Which is what we're training first years to do at Fordham. Do you mind if I touch your shoulder? Well, now, so there's been a lot of changes in terms of consent. In the publishing market, there's just been so many changes in terms of genres, because with indie writers, you got all these wonderful niche, niche genres and people publishing, longer books that New York wouldn't have picked up. Mariana Zapata is one of my absolute favorite authors, so I got to give a shout out to her long, fabulous, Kindle Unlimited books. And then I'll just say, finally, the one thing I'm really loving right now is serialization. So I've written 2 serialized novellas for Amazon Vela, which is this novella. I really love it. It's kind of like moving from Jane Austen to Dickens a little bit, but it's really fun to take a journey with the readers where they read one and then the next Wednesday you're going to have another segment, and it gives a lot of people write me and say, oh yeah, it gives my Wednesdays are more fun at lunch or whatever, because you've got something to read. So
Just a little snack.
yeah, Laura, you go next.
I've been published for 25 years, so I might have started.
What was your year? What was your first year?
94. Oh, it's more than 25.
Totally beat me. Yeah, sorry.
The time gets away from you. I got the rights back to some of my older books, and I was putting them up on Amazon, and I had to go back through there and completely rewrite them because so much has changed about, like you said, with consent and just attitudes like, you're supposed to get married and stay home and have kids, and there's not an option for you, and that's supposed to be your end all be all. And I love how now women can do what they want to do, and the guys will help them with the kids, and it's a different world, and it's been very exciting to see it change. Kind of a bumpy ride at times, but very exciting.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would echo what both of you have said, and I've taken that journey as a reader as well. And I think one of the things that has been so essential and so important, in addition to the consent components, is how much more diversity we're seeing in fiction. And, speaking to romance in particular, there are so many more love stories on the shelf. And I think that is incredibly important. And I think it's not just, is it an opportunity to read more stories, but it's an opportunity to read more voices, bringing those stories to life and telling their view of the world and bringing the beauty of romance to that. So I love those changes. And this is, I sold in 2008, but my first book came out in early 2010. So, to say in the last 12 and a half years, those changes, I think, have been so needed and so necessary and so wonderful with all the different voices that are in the market.
100% agree with Addison. That's something that I definitely noticed and love as a reader, as a consumer. Have friends who want to read gay romance, and finally that's available. And I know people have been writing it forever, but in terms of New York picking it up, it seems like a more recent evolution. My first contract was in 2015. I would say, in terms of the genre and historical genre itself, I agree with Eloisa that these issues of consent, but also, like you said, Lori, the women, my heroines aren't only interested in marriage. We are essentially rewriting a marriage plot, a marriage story, almost without fail. But often the goals for my heroines are hopefully ones that women today can also relate to. They're not only sort of goals that a Victorian or Regency woman might relate to. So I try and build that in as well. But I think the big thing that I really love about the publishing world right now is that their books are just so available. Like, you know, in terms of like Kindle Vella, in terms of indie published authors, in terms of formats that you can get books in. My mother swore for a long time she would never read anything but a physical book, and now she won't be without her Kindle. So the variety of options is great.
Yep, I find I'm about a third digital, a third physical, and a third audio. I have found audiobooks to be, you know, when I'm commuting, when I'm doing chores, you know, just a very, very soothing, especially if, you know, I have a headache or I'm, you know, having a hard time focusing, having it in a different experience, a different sensory input is helpful. But as you all said, happy endings are for everybody. And now those are so much more available for everyone to read. So you don't have to be a traditional, you know, character in order to find yourself in a story. You can find examples of everybody, and everybody can find themselves in a romance novel, hopefully. Let's see, what does your writing process look like? Do you get characters first, plot points first? Where do you get your inspirations from? Can I start with you on this one, Christy?
Sure. I have so many ideas that I have like I've learned to keep one journal because I would scribble, you know, the whole plot bunny notion that when you're writing, there's no time that I come up with more story ideas than when I'm supposed to be finishing a book. So I have lots of ideas, and they come from everywhere. They come from things I've watched, things I've heard. You know, I love reading. Like I said, a history major. I was a history teacher. I love reading history books. So I'm always reading about the era that I'm writing in, and I'll see some little snippet and decide that really needs to be incorporated in my story. So it can come from anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, don't go after romance writers for historical accuracy. They've got the receipts. They've got all the notes. I love it.
I guess I'll join on to that one as a historical writer. Mine, like yours, come from everywhere and from historical details. Sometimes I get an idea and I see the scene before I have any characters. So I have one book, Your Wicked Ways, and the only scene I had starting that was I wanted there to be an estranged husband and wife, and I wanted the wife to really want to have a baby, because at that point, a lot of my friends were in IVF. And I wanted the husband to be living with his mistress. And then I wanted the three of them to be at dinner, and the wife to say to the mistress, if you don't mind, I'll borrow him tonight. If I remember rightly, it's only 15 minutes. And the mistress looking at her and saying, 5 minutes if you're lucky. That was a great book. Wow. That was my first one to hit the New York Times 115. And there's a reason for that. I mean, mind you, I made it all work out. Like they weren't really sleeping together, blah, blah, blah. But that's the scene that blew it. And then I have other things, like I went to a museum in England and there was a pineapple on the table. And the docent in the museum explained that pineapples were rented for dinner parties. So, you know, My American Duchess is all about an American who goes over to England and eats the several $1,000s worth of pineapple at one dinner party, not knowing it had been rented.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the little details. Then you build a character around it. She had to be American because she didn't know. Then you have an American Duchess. Then, you know, one thing leads to another.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it is almost always characters. I would echo the point that stories are everywhere, but what I find is it's usually a spark of a character or a spark of these two characters and why they're meant to be together. What's interesting though, Eloisa, about the pineapple story, what I do find interesting, and it ends up happening more often than I realize, is there will be something that I see or read while I'm working on a book that will often find its way in. Yeah. So this particular book, Gray, the hero, is starting a blind horse rescue. I didn't plan that. I knew that he had something going on. I didn't plan that specifically. And I'd seen this amazing story about the rescue of blind horses. And it just caught my attention thoroughly. And I was like, oh, okay, I can fit this in. So while I can't say that I write about real people, or I'm not one of those who finds, oh, I'm going to write a story about, that's that person, or I'm going to weave, somebody that I know into a bad guy or something like that. Almost inevitably, some experience that I have while writing will trickle its way in. And in this particular book, it was that story about the horse rescue.
What about you, Lori? What's your writing process like?
Well, like this book that came out, the Cowboy Cookie Challenge, I knew that I was going to write about that character. So since she'd been a character in other books, it started with the character with that one. Usually, though, I start with a concept of, because I learned the hard way when I was writing for Harlequin. They're very much, you write on a trope. You don't have books without tropes. And I had been writing this book that was in a series, and it was the fourth book in the series. And I didn't have a trope, but I'd forgotten that lesson. So I wrote it, and then the editor rejected it, made me start from scratch, throw everything out 4 times.
Oh, wow.
And then finally on the 4th time, I thought, I don't have a trope. So never again do I do a book without a concept, without a firm concept. And you know what? Since then, I've never been rejected. And before that, I had about a 50% rejection rate. So I usually start with a concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the tropes definitely sell. Do you have any characters either in your most recent release or in any of your releases that you really related to personally, or that you put a lot of your own personality into?
So I definitely think that there's a part of me in everything that I write, and because I know I'm bringing my worldview into so much of what I'm doing.
Sure.
But definitely there are maybe certain characters or certain experiences that they're going through that will be a bit of a match. In this book in particular, I actually have a secondary romance, an older couple, the heroine's father and a woman who was somebody that he worked with, and she's ultimately kind of pulled into the horse rescue aspect. And although I'm not quite that age yet, I'm aging, and it was fun to write a romance about people that were, a little bit older, and see, them still be very vibrant, and still see them, having their happy ever after and their experiences. But those experiences were a bit more seasoned because of their age and what they'd been through. And so it was fun to play with that a little bit and bring, a little bit of perspective that you have as you age as well, and your own experiences, the things that you see your friends go through. Find ways to bring that and work through that in the writing.
Sure. Anyone else have a character that they particularly related to or put themselves into?
Well, I'll say that I don't have much similarity to a duchess or a countess, alas, but I did write one love story as Mary Bly, which is called Lizzie and Dante, and came out last year.
Mm-hmm.
And my heroine is a Shakespeare professor. And that was about the closest I got, since I am a Shakespeare professor and that's what I do all day. And I sent her over to Elba, where I've gone with my husband, who's Italian, 1,000,000 times. And I made her fall in love with an Italian chef. That part of it is wish fulfillment, because my husband can't cook anything except for scrambled eggs. But I used my life and put my daughter in that book a lot. She's very proud about it. It has a quote at the beginning of every chapter, which are actually the quotes that I took from her bedroom door.
Wow.
So I managed to catch her, I think, pretty well when she was 13. So that was fun.
I love that. Lori or Christy?
Oh, pretty well, I'm in every one of them. There's something you draw on what you know for me, and all my heroines have dysfunctional mothers. My mother had narcissistic personality disorder, so I don't know how to write a normal mother. So that's in all my stories. I have had comments like, these people are dysfunctional. It's like, you write what you know.
Sure.
Yeah, I the same I mean, I feel like I can't think of any particular character I've written that I feel like I kind of modeled on me or in any way, but I think there's a piece of me in all my heroes and heroines, probably all my secondary characters too. I try and focus on things that are relatable. I think with James, when I wrote that book, James is the hero in Lady Meets Earl. When I wrote that book, I was going through a big personal transition, and he's a character who has lost everything and is trying to rebuild and believe that he can be what he was, and sort of that feeling of what is my identity and who am I and how can I rebuild that in the midst of meeting someone at really not the greatest time in your life to be falling in love and meeting someone and trying to rebuild yourself when you meet somebody that you really also want to impress and want to be impressive for. So in that way, I think there was a little bit of personal what I was going through coming out in that character in that story.
Mhm. Do you have any advice that you would give to someone who is just starting out, either just in writing and publishing in general, or specifically in the romance genre?
So I referenced before that Lori and I had been part of the same romance writers chapter many years ago. There had also been a woman that I knew through a mutual friend who my day job is in advertising and marketing, and can be a very long days. And I was kind of struggling through this idea of, I needed to continue working, but I wanted to write, I wanted to be a writer. And she gave me a wonderful piece of advice, and it just happened to be at the very first RWA meeting I ever went to. I went up to introduce myself during the break because, like I said, we had a mutual friend. And I said, how are you making this work? You work in advertising as well. How are you kind of getting through this? How are you publishing and doing both? And she said, I don't worry about writing the whole book. I focus on writing a chapter at a time and continue moving forward. And it was one of those, it was just the perfect piece of advice at the perfect moment. And those two things, it just kind of clicked for me in a way that was very meaningful to that stage of my own life. And then very meaningful to my journey in becoming a writer professionally. Because you do have to create even when you have other commitments. You do need to continue to produce, but all of a sudden kind of breaking it down to a chapter, focus on the scene and the chapter, made it digestible in a way that I hadn't thought of. And for me in particular, that was a huge piece of writing advice that I've carried ever since.
Bird by bird.
Yeah, it really is.
Mine fits in with that. I think my best piece of advice, people are always asking me, how do you be a professor and a writer? Or now I'm chair of the department. So
Oh,
I've got
goodness.
some 40 dysfunctional faculty under me. I write in sprints, and I highly suggest sprints. Anybody can find 25 minutes, and 25 minutes supposedly is scientifically proven to be the time that you can actually concentrate. So I have a bunch of different friends that I will do a sprint with, but if I'm on my own, I do one sprint. You can do one sprint, even if you're facing a horrendous day. And a lot of times, I do most of my writing during the summer when I'm not teaching, but I keep writing during the year, because if you quit, there's a terrible wish not to start up again, and then the deadlines get behind. And if you could just keep like that little scene, you're still working on that scene, well, in a week of sprints, you'll be done with that scene and on to the next one. And they pile up really fast. So that's my advice.
Every little bit counts. You got to keep the muscle strong, even when you're not using it a ton. Got to keep using it a little.
What do you teach in your retreat, Lori? I'm curious about your retreat.
Okay, now this is tricky because it's about creativity, and you can't really teach creativity, but you can make an environment where people are able to access their creativity. And what I found with beginners is they tend to be too linear, and they tend to be too hidebound with the rules, and they don't kind of know how to let go. So I teach them how to kind of let go of their preconceived notions and start trying to revision the story in a different way.
Interesting. And how many people do you usually have at a retreat at a time when you're working on that?
The most we've had is 8. Usually it's 3 to 4 people that know each other. They come out, and I have about 4 or 5 a year that we do that. 4 or 5 times a year.
So they get some pretty good one-on-one attention with you.
Yeah, we do yoga. We do a lot of mindfulness stuff too, because I think writers especially tend to just have all this stuff going on in their minds, and you just need sometimes to get out of your head and get into your body and get some quiet so that you can hear the ideas coming through.
Sounds lovely.
What about you, Christy? Do you have any advice that you would give to a new writer?
I mean, the first thing that came to mind is tenacity, because it's very easy to get discouraged. As we talked about, the industry is fast moving right now and changing, but it's also so full of different kinds of opportunities. So I'd say tenacity, but also some flexibility. Lori was talking about kind of when you start writing, you feel very rule bound. I have to do things exactly this way. And there are definitely rules that you want to sort of be mindful of. But I think if it's really your goal and your dream, and tenacity, and I think that sort of relates to the sprint idea and the 1-inch window and bird by bird is idea too. Do what you can, but keep at it. And tenacity is sort of how I got lucky and ended up getting a contract. But tenacity is definitely a part of how I've continued, because writing 12 books in 7 years or whatever was a lot, but it was just remembering that if I kept with it, then my skill would grow and my readership would grow, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, well, we're gonna play a little game. I've got a bunch of would you rather questions. So it's actually similar, Addison, to what we did in the first one with tropes.
Okay.
But this is a little bit broader. There's some about writing and books and some about holidays and things like that. So I'll read one off and you guys can just jump in with whichever one you would prefer. The first one is related to being book lovers, which you all have said you are. If you get to a place and you have to stop your book, but there are no bookmark implements or objects around that you could use, would you rather lay your book flat and break the spine, or dog ear the page to mark your place?
Dog ear the page.
Okay. Lori is either
I
one.
can't do either one. I'm sorry. I could read a whole book without breaking the spine.
Me too. Can I give you a third option, which is I just force myself to remember the page and then I close it?
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
about? What about?
I met Tessa Dare at a thing, and she, she's a librarian, and she says, "Oh no," she said, "I love it when people dog ear it and break the spine and mark it up. It shows it's loved." And I'm like, no, it's sacred.
I definitely have some well-loved books and I can appreciate those, but when I loan books out to people and then they come back and they have like bent pages or bent spines or then that makes me sad. Then I have to buy another copy, and that can be my loan out copy. But my copy on my shelf, I want it to be. That's why I have like 700 bookmarks. I am never without a bookmark. Would you rather have dinner with your favorite author or with your favorite fictional character? And who would it be?
Shakespeare. Spent my whole life teaching Shakespeare. I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
I'll just leave it there. Lot
Yep.
of questions.
That's fair.
I would definitely an author, because I'd rather talk to an actual person. I would pick Mark Twain.
Okay.
I think I'd go for an author as well. I would say Mary Shelley.
Ooh,
Oh.
Yeah.
she would have stories.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm going to go to Fantasyland on this one. So, my absolute favorite hero ever put to paper is Malcolm Cavanaugh in Nora Roberts' Happy Ever After. There is something about that character. I'm not a big book rereader, and I've reread that book like 8-10 times.
Really?
There is just something about that character that I love. So, I would love to go to dinner with Malcolm Cavanaugh.
Okay. I have a lot of authors on my list of people. But right now, I think the one I would pick would be India Holton. Her books, Dangerous Damsels books, it's like she took my personality, all the weird and lovely and sweet and funny, all the and just put them into books. Like I want to just climb into them. So I would just love to have a conversation with her face to face, have a cup of tea, just see what else is going on in that brain of hers.
Maybe someday.
Maybe someday. She lives on the other side of the world, but I have told her if she is ever in the States, she has to come to Grand Rapids, and we will throw a party at Schuler Books, or she can come to my house.
Yeah.
We'll make it, I have tea. I will make it work. So India, if you're watching. Let's see. All right. If you didn't have a word processor, computer, something, would you rather write by hand or by typewriter?
Typewriter.
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 Since I was back in the day when they had typewriters, I'd rather write by hand. There's a connection with your hand that I don't get from an instrument. And so when I'm brainstorming and writing my book, I write it out, not the first draft, but the brainstorming, the character development, I do that all by hand.
Okay, excellent. All right, you are writing your next bestseller. Would you rather write it in an isolated cabin in the woods or in a bustling coffee shop filled with inspiration?
Woods.
Woods.
Woods. Everybody seems on the same page with
Yeah.
that one. No distractions. No. All right. If you couldn't write any more romance, if that was just not an option, would you rather write a cozy mystery series or a science fiction saga?
Mystery.
Cozy mystery.
Mystery. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'd go for sci-fi. I love sci-fi. I just don't think I have the imagination for it. But I mean, if I was forced to, I tried a mystery before romance and I had a huge difficulty with the murderer.
Okay.
I couldn't, I mean, the only way I could think of someone murdering, I started getting into their mother and this and that and the other thing. And that's not what a mystery's supposed to be.
You start diving into the psychology and
Yeah, I couldn't make it. I couldn't make the person real until they were real. And then you don't want them to be then it's not the murder anymore. The murder's got to be like poisoning the toothpaste and being bad.
Mhm, mhm. All right. Well, would you rather travel back in time or travel far into the future? And if you know, when and where would you go?
So I'd love to go back in time, and I absolutely love New York City, turn of the century. I love anything that's set in that time period. I thought Caleb Carr's work in The Alienist and The Angel of Darkness are some of the best books I have ever read. I absolutely loved. I love that time period in New York's history, and so I would go backwards, and I'd love to see my neighborhood. 125, 130 years ago.
Okay.
It would be
I'm
late
going for
Victorian
Shakespeare,
London for me.
1608, London. Sorry, Christy, what were you saying?
I would say it would be late Victorian London, the period I write in. I
Mhm.
choose that period because I absolutely love it. So
Mhm, mhm. What about you, Lori?
I don't know. I really don't know. The future might be cool. But maybe not.
If there is one, right? Dystopia thing hanging out there.
Yeah, at least the past, we kind of know what you're going back to. With the future, anyone's guess.
I don't know. I'd really take the future because I think that even though at times it doesn't seem like it, I think we're on an evolutionary trajectory where things are going to be better eventually.
Okay. I like the hope. I like the hope.
Yeah.
I think that there's something about like Gilded Age New York or Chicago.
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting. Just sort of the dynamics that are at play there that are slightly different than when you're reading Regency or Victorian or Georgian.
Mhm.
I think that would be my place. Also the fashion just is
Yeah.
fantastic. Let's see. Okay, now if you had to pick, would you rather explore space or explore the depths of the ocean?
Space.
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 Okay,
Ocean.
All
I
right.
used to want to be an oceanographer at one point before I realized that writers were a thing.
I think my claustrophobia, my slight claustrophobia would make me do space. I think deep in the water, although I am a water child, I love to be in the water. Too deep, I think would start to give me
The idea of being under it, yeah.
and not being able to get back to that would be, although space
I was gonna say.
Kind of the same.
can be kind of crushing too. So all right. Would you rather be able to speak any language in the world or be able to communicate with any animal?
Animal.
Animals.
Language.
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 I'd go language as well.
Yeah.
I always find it amazing. I always say this. I always feel that our pets actually do communicate with us.
Mhm.
They're not necessarily speaking, but they're definitely communicating. I know exactly when my beagle's internal bell has gone off that he's hungry, as well as any number of other things, but hunger is usually at the top of his list.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Christy, I didn't hear. Did you give an answer?
Oh, I said I would love to talk to animals.
Animals. Okay. All right. Shifting a little bit towards holidays. Would you rather shop in stores on Black Friday or online on Cyber Monday?
Line.
Online.
Online.
Yeah, I don't need the crowds. And I work in retail, which is fun. But for me, I would like the online. Would you rather have a food fight on Thanksgiving or a snowball fight on your winter holiday?
Snowball. I don't want to clean up.
Yes.
Snowball.
If you don't have to clean up the kitchen.
Even so.
You don't want to have food in your hair. I was known as a baby for throwing my peas. So I guess
So you're a natural for the food.
I'm a
fight.
natural at a food fight. My aim is terrible, but would you rather go to an ugly holiday sweater party or a holiday cookie exchange party?
Cookie exchange.
Cookies.
Cookies, yeah.
Cookies. I love my
I knew Lori would be about the cookies. Would you rather have a white Christmas with snow or a warm Christmas with sun?
Snow.
No.
Yeah, definitely the snow.
I think sun.
Although I say that, I do think it could be fun. I think it would be very fun to be in Australia for Christmas and have be in summer for Christmas, or be in the Southern Hemisphere and experience Christmas. Christy, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you.
I think sun sounds nice, but I know in my heart, I'm from Indiana, so I always want to have that moment of snow.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So the last couple are winter, but with a little bit of a romance twist to them. Would you rather go ice skating or sledding with your childhood best friend who is suddenly looking at you in a very different way?
Ice skating.
I'm gonna go ice skating too. I love serendipity way too much. And yeah, I'm gonna go ice skating.
Okay.
I'll go sledding.
Well, I was leaning towards ice skating, but the sledding part, if you went on the same sled, might lead to more romantic encounters.
When you get to the bottom and you all tumble
Yeah.
off.
You can pretend to be graceful.
Okay.
Skating.
Okay. Would you rather be snowed in close quarters overnight with your annoyingly attractive nemesis, or be forced to partner with them to plan the big holiday party?
Oh my God. Number one.
Snowed in.
Note in. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, last one. Would you rather be in a time crunch to make and decorate 4 dozen cookies or wrap 4 dozen presents with your first love who broke your heart years ago but recently came back into your life?
I'm going to take the cookies because my family has forbidden me to wrap packages. I'm that bad.
go cookies too.
Cookies, yeah.
I'm gonna go for wrapping. I love wrapping presents. So,
Two. I do all of the wrapping except for the gifts for me. I could do that all day, every day.
that's fun.
I hate wrapping. I went on Etsy and there's all these people on Etsy selling Christmas bags now, in different sizes. So
Mhm.
a year or so ago, I just bought a ton of them in Christmas fabric. And now we just reuse them, for family presents.
Yeah.
Great. No ribbon.
I've recently had a bit of a problem with Etsy. I've gone a little bit too far. I need to take my login information and I need someone to take Etsy away from me. But that has been a coping mechanism the last couple of years when I can't go out and shop. Etsy is a beautiful place. All right, we've just got a few more minutes here. So before we say goodbye, I would love to know what you are currently reading or most excited to read soon.
Well, I just finished Deadline, so I'm looking forward to having some time to read. I have The Silent Patient on my bedside table, so I'm going to dive into that tomorrow.
Excellent.
So I have a whole load of pre-orders.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my pre-order. So I have an Abby Green, Harlequin Presents. I have Ilona Andrews has got a new book coming out. I have a Lynn Graham, Harlequin Presents. I have Jessie Mielek, who writes really great sci-fi coming out. And Loretta Chase, but I don't know, this one never seems to come, but I'm still waiting for it. Also, The Bride Bet Girl Gets Duped by Tessa Dare still in my pre-order thing too. Doesn't seem to be making sense, but who knows?
Yep.
Maybe it'll come.
Waiting on Tessa Dare and Loretta Chase as well. Those just keep getting bumped back and back and back. But what about you, Addison? What are you reading or looking forward to read?
Yeah, so I just picked up The Choice, the third book in Nora Roberts' new trilogy. And so that is that's gonna be my holiday kind of really dive in. I love gulping those down in one big inhale if possible. So I'm looking forward to that one.
And what about you, Christy?
I am currently on Deadline, so I'm not reading anything. Just super stressed. But I am looking for. I have a couple of books on my my bedside table and on my Kindle, and one is Kerrigan Byrne has started a Victorian historical mystery series. And I read the first and I loved it, and I can't wait to read the second one. And then my first Alexandria Bellafleur, Written in the Stars. I haven't read any thing by her previously, but I started that book and I loved it, and I had to stop it so I could finish writing this book I'm writing. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that one. It's sitting right here kind of as motivation.
Good. Yeah, a coworker loves Alexandra Bellafleur's, all of hers. They've been wonderful. I just got my advanced reader copy of the next India Holton, so that will be my first December book after today. And then I also my favorite book that was not romance related this year is When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill. Just absolutely fascinating alternative US history where hundreds of thousands of women spontaneously turn into dragons and disappear. And how the society deals with that or doesn't, and how the science works. If you haven't checked it out, like, the writing is beautiful. It's fascinating. She also had a middle grade novel that has been on a lot of the best of lists this year called The Ogress and the Orphan. So that's my next non-romance book up. But if you haven't read Kelly Barnhill, she has stuff in just about every genre, and it's fantastic. If she wrote a romance, forget about it. She might bump India Holton down to second place. I don't know. It's pretty close. All right, and then finally, what can us readers look for next from each of you? Lori, let's start with you. What's coming next from you?
In March, I have the fourth women's fiction in the Moonglow Cove series, where the on her wedding day to her husband, the woman's first husband, who they thought was dead, comes back, and he's her new husband's brother.
Oh,
Ooh.
That was so intense
Ooh.
writing that book.
oh
Sounds like
my.
fiction.
Yeah. What about you, Christy? What do you have coming next for us?
The third book in the Love on Holiday trilogy is Duke Seeks Bride, and that is currently up on pre-order. I just saw the cover, and they just got it up on pre-order almost immediately, and so it's gorgeous. And but I'm still writing it, so but it's coming out in August. And I currently have a holiday anthology with 11 other authors called Duke in a Box, which is only available in digital, but it is 12 fresh new holiday romance novellas that's available right now.
Cool. I'll write that one down. What about you, Addison?
So the third book in the Rustlers Creek trilogy comes out in May. Charlotte, who is the heroine, excuse me, the hero in book one, his sister, and her town nemesis, who they've bickered publicly since the fourth grade. But of course, we all know that's just a front. But they are forced to work together on a project, and how they really feel ultimately comes out. So Always Her Cowboy comes out in May. And then I also have the conclusion. I write also for Harlequin Romantic Suspense. And I've got the conclusion. I've got a series called Midnight Pass, Texas. And it's a romantic suspense series set in a made-up town down in South Texas. And in January, Her Texas Lawman comes out. So that's the final book in that series.
Right. And Eloisa, what can we look for next from you?
The next thing coming out is I'm writing another seduction in my Amazon Vela series. So that comes out on Valentine's Day, or it starts on Valentine's Day because that's a serialization. So, you know, I'd love it if people picked it up and carried along with me. They've gone and added comments now so that people can comment. And then I can go in and say, well, this will or won't happen. Kind of fun. I'm looking forward to that. And then next summer, I have Not That Duke, which, like Christy, I have not finished writing, and it does seem to be up for pre-order, but it's actually a lot of fun because it's the heroine appears in this book and the hero is in love with her, and you can see she is drop dead gorgeous. My heroine in Not That Duke doesn't feel drop dead gorgeous, and she ends up married to the Duke who was trying to marry this woman. And that's a tough place to be.
Yeah. Well, good.
It's good
Well,
though.
thank you all so much for joining me this evening. It's been an absolute delight. I love talking to each of you. Special thanks to Avon Books for partnering with Schuler Books this year for this series, and to all the authors who have joined me for conversation about their books. This has just been a dream come true as a lifelong romance reader to get to talk to all of you, and I hope to be able to meet up with you in future events for future books. Look forward to reading many more of your stories and happily ever afters in the future. I hope you all have wonderful holidays, safe times, be well. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
Amy.
everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye. Good night,
Bye.
everybody.
Good night.